forget about Disney World, all of that stuff. This week, you are in the happiest place on earth because car sales are going up and gas prices are going down. I filled up a full-size pickup for under $25 today from Fumes, and it's amazing. This is the auto show that a lot of people who just hung on through the bad days, they've been waiting for. If you see anybody who's not happy, any executive who's not happy on the show floor this week, I will give you 5 to 1 that they work for Takata. Everybody else feels like this is the reward they get for hanging around. I mean, this is a let the good times roll show. And Scott and I, we're here to talk about some of the vehicles that will be introduced in the next couple of days. There's one rule. Some of the information we have is embargoed, which means we can't talk about it until the press conference. So whenever Scott breaks an embargo, everybody does a shot. Okay? Until we all forget. So with that ready, I mean, there's tonight already, there are unveilings taking place all over town. We were both just at one for Infinity, and there's a lot of stuff going on with luxury brands tonight. There's the Buick Cascada, which I believe we've got a photo of that we can show you, because that just came off an embargo. And we've got several luxury brands tonight, Scott. What do you think of the Infinity?
I was really impressed. Infinity's been a struggling brand. It's a brand that has struggled to try to find its identity. And I think that the Q60 is something that is really going to move that brand forward. And they announced today that it was going to go on sale in 2016.
Yes.
And right now, I think the luxury market is filled with lots of really good choices. And some of the things that we're going to see at the Detroit show, like the Jaguar.
Then tonight, Jaguar is making all kinds of news. They are about to announce that they are going to be adding diesels pretty much across the Jaguar and Land Rover model line in North America. And as you were saying, Scott, they've got Jaguar as a crossover coming.
Yeah, and it's, as we saw from the sales results in 2014, crossovers are where it's at. That's why trucks outsold cars. And basically, those are all different versions of SUVs, but they're much more efficient now. And it seems to be the thing that people want the most. And we're going to see a ton of those at the Detroit show. Volkswagen is going to have a big crossover. You're going to see the Audi Q7 is another one that's coming. And those are, I mean, the price points on those are really high to begin with.
Yep. And Mercedes has got a couple of new versions of the, what are they calling it? The GKE 450. And I believe there are some pictures of that for the person who's handling our photos as well. And that's sort of a sporty version of what used to be the M-Class, but they've changed names.
Yeah, its look is a lot like the X6, which is kind of an answer to a question no one has ever asked when it comes to a vehicle. It's a 4-passenger SUV-ish kind of thing that goes fast and costs $80,000. But people are buying those, and so, I mean, it's one I can't blame anybody for making it if you can create a market.
And Mercedes as well. I mean, sometimes it seems like the product planning for Mercedes is done in Munich. It's just whatever BMW does, we'll have one of those too. And honestly, BMW, I mean, all the Germans seem to be sort of equally reflexive in it. But in particular, Mercedes is starting to reflect the mushrooming of the product line that we've seen at BMW over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, BMW has so many different products, and they try to fill every single gap. I mean, they could sell 100,000 vehicles, and it's just one of each. And this year in Detroit, what they're going to have is 6 Series.
Yes, updates of all of them, I think, all the 6 Series cars.
And once again, I think that right now Mercedes still kind of holds an edge over BMW in the overall quality. The S-Class, when it came out, is just so far ahead of everything else that I've seen in that segment.
And one of the things that I wonder about, and I'll be interested probably in doing a story at some point and asking some of you folks about it, the 6 Series from BMW is getting some reasonably significant revisions this year. I honestly can't remember if I drove the outgoing version of it. I mean, the model lines are getting sliced so thin that it's very difficult to pay attention to them, and I wonder how well that works for the consumers as well. I mean, do they get confused, or is there somebody who really is going into a Mercedes, dealership saying, no, I don't want an M-Class, that's too SUV, I want a GKE 450, the one you were just talking about.
And the other thing that I find really interesting is in previous years, if you would have seen this many electric vehicles coming, things like the Volt or the Dolt or the Bolt, if we'd have seen so many, that would have been the headlines that everybody's writing about. And now that's not the case. Now that's just one of the many cars that they bring in. The only people excited about the diesels are probably auto journalists. That we've carried that flag for as long as we can, and people just still are not interested in buying that many diesels.
And you're right. I mean, it remains a tiny proportion of the market. But I think it's going to be very interesting this year to watch, because we've got Jaguar and Land Rover adding a bunch of diesels. We've got the Germans all relying on diesels pretty heavily. And we've got gasoline ridiculously cheap. And it'll take diesel a while, even though the economics of refining those two gives me a headache. But at some point, because they are both petroleum-based products, the fact that a barrel of gas costs half as much as it did in June will also be reflected in diesel prices, so they'll come down too. But a lot of people are banking pretty heavily on diesels, and where's the payback? And the one thing that was interesting all last year was how much Ford was sort of downplaying diesels because they made their bet on aluminum.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to look at. And right now, every time a person drives past a gas station, they see diesel costs $1 more. It's something that they don't want to buy. Forget the fact the residuals are significantly higher for diesels as opposed to gas engines. The other car I think is really important to take a look at is the NSX. It's going to be beautiful. I mean, this is what you get into auto journalism for, is to get behind the wheel of a car like that. And it's a hybrid, so once again, green wins.
And fast, and there's nothing else like it. I mean, it's one of the cars that, this auto show becomes a landmark show almost because the NSX all-wheel drive hybrid was here, even if nothing else was, right?
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
You could just have a show for the NSX. I mean, it's just a beautiful car, and it's something that for Honda, it'll be an Acura. The first time it came around in the early 90s, it really vaulted Honda's sportiness and did a lot for the reputation. Acura is one of the luxury brands that still has no identity. Other than ugly front ends, and
now they don't even have that anymore.
Yeah, and so it's difficult to really decide what Acura wants to be. And I hope that the NSX leads the language for Acura's future.
They needed to make them relevant and to make people care, honestly. And that gets back to some of what we were talking about with several luxury brands that have kind of muddled images too. I mean, Buick wants to be a luxury brand. I don't know if they're there or not yet. I don't know about you, but the Cascada is an interesting looking car.
And it's something that's very un-Buick. It's been a very good marriage I see between Opel and bringing in Opel cars. The Regal is just an insignia rebadge as a Buick. And I think that the 2+2 convertible, I look at it something like Lexus did with its two-seater convertible, and how much that helped. The other thing is there's a lot of trucks that are coming to the show as well. The Toyota Tacoma is after 10 years has finally been refreshed. I think that,
and another one of the big deal cars that really defines a segment.
Yes,
the Tacoma. It's one of the vehicles that Toyota's reputation rests upon.
But they own 70% of that mid-size pickup market, and obviously there's with the Colorado and the Canyon coming. There's going to be
Motor Trend.
I didn't want to plug Motor Trend, but it was Motor Trend's truck of the year because it's a great truck.